Back when I first made the video on Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry, I was still pretty much a novice to the franchise. I've owned the first two games on PS3 and played them, but not to completion. I played the first game until the 5th Templar, mostly just messing around in a compelling and artistic open world. Playing the second game, I didn't even make it past Ezio's teen years. Again, fooling around the sandbox and trying to make Ezio ragdoll when jumping to another building. And I've only played small segments of Brotherhood, 3, Black Flag, and Odyssey, with the former 3 being played at a friend's place. But now that time has passed and I've gotten the opportunity to play every mainline Assassin's Creed game in chronological order, only finishing the pre-RPG games but playing a good portion of Origins, I wanted to go back to Freedom Cry with fresh eyes and a better context. Freedom Cry was the first Assassin's Creed game I played till completion. But now that I've played through the Desmond Saga, the Kenway Saga, Unity with Fair Frustration, Syndicate, and a good amount of Origins, I wanted to present a more mature, confident, and more valid take on Freedom Cry as a now proper Assassin's Creed fan. This video is more of a follow-up to the previous Freedom Cry video, as I feel that this video is still meant to be more of an evolution of my feelings on the game, rather than a realization or reimagination of that previous video. But let's get on with my new take on Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry. Freedom Cry tells the tale of a much wiser and more personal Adewale. Gone is his somewhat vibrant and occasionally inviting charm from Black Flag that I wasn't aware of at the time I first played this game. His time with Edward is over, and now it's back to his life's mission. Adewale is washed up on the shores of Port-au-Prince with a Templar parcel, meant for someone named Bastien Joseph. Ade and Bastien work together with the Maroons Rebellion to liberate the slaves of the Haitian colony and kill a man named Governor de Fayette. In the end, the Templar parcel turns out to be a precursor box. The end. The premise is mostly great, but is ruined by the fact that it tries to do a bit too much while feeling like it achieves so little. The Templar parcel, or precursor box plotline, is my main issue. I feel like it shouldn't even be part of the story because it ends up doing absolutely nothing in the end, wasting time and potential that could have been spent on the characters and the themes of the game. Because the premise of Adewale risking re-enslavement to liberate the slaves of Haiti and kill the governor behind the colonies makes for a really solid story. Throw in some memorable and layered characters, even with this game's roughly 3-hour runtime, and we have one of the tightest Assassin's Creed stories. The dialogue is great, which is to be expected from these older games. It's straightforward and occasionally dramatic and emotional. But the plot gets caught up in unnecessary stuff that don't really have any narrative significance to the main premise or themes of the game. And it all links back to the stupid precursor box. The precursor stuff doesn't really matter in this game, and you'll end up forgetting it was even part of the story until the end. The only narrative significance this plotline has is bringing Adewale to Haiti. Adding to the unnecessary plotlines are the very underutilized characters, including Ade. Back when I first played this game and made that original video, I couldn't really connect to Adewale because of how serious and mildly flat he was as a character. But after playing through the entire Kenway saga, I have a much better context and appreciation of Adewale. And while I still can't quite connect to Freedom Cry's Ade, I've grown to like him a lot more in Black Flag, and as a character overall. But it comes to show how much Freedom Cry doesn't really do his character much justice. If you haven't played Black Flag, Adewale won't make too much of an impression on you. I mean, he's still a likable character because of his goals and upbringing, but other than that, he doesn't feel like anyone special. But when you play Black Flag, you get to see how much of a great character he truly is. I really like Adewale in Black Flag. He was serious, but he was still so entertaining to watch and would occasionally have his lighthearted moments. He was a memorable character. This could be the fact that Adewale was much younger in Black Flag, roughly 15 years younger in fact, but still he lacks that entertaining and compelling aspect of his character in this game, and he's not alone in this regard. Every other character in this game is just flat outside of the database. The problem is that this game was poorly planned out, and because of that it feels incomplete or held back. They knew this game was going to be small, and yet they still try to cram in lore that doesn't belong in the story. And because they crammed in this unnecessary Assassin's Creed lore, the story is robbed of its potential of being a unique and personal Assassin's Creed experience that the series hasn't seen in a while at that point. Emotionally, Black Flag was pretty gut-wrenching and was the only Assassin's Creed game that really made me feel connected to these characters on a personal level. But the plot of finding a piece of Eden was getting very stale at this point. At least the gameplay is still great and a bit better than I remember, thanks to absolutely slaying in the other games. Except Unity, but I'll get into that later. Sure, Freedom Cry plays exactly like Black Flag, but this is far from a bad thing. Black Flag had a great framework, and Freedom Cry is only an expansion to begin with. We get a few new additions when it comes to Adewale's arsenal. We get a machete as Ade's main weapon, which acts like any other single-handed weapon before it, but everything else in your inventory is pretty much the same. Hidden blades, darts, and you can no longer craft in this game as the feature to skin animals is completely removed. But this is where things get a bit fun. Adewale's firearm is none other than a whole damn blunderbuss. Gone are Edward's flintlock pistols. You got a shotgun type cannon that absolutely destroys, but you need to be up close. This thing can take out multiple enemies at once, but with that being said, you need to be careful of where you use it, because it can and will take out anyone in its wide radius. And you don't want to be blasting slaves to shreds, do you? This thing can take out 5 enemies in one well-placed shot, which is required to get all the PlayStation trophies for this game. The blunderbuss is a literal blast to use. Every other gameplay system in Freedom Cry works exactly like it does in Black Flag, from naval gameplay to stealth and combat. But there's a new system specific to this game as it ties into the themes of liberation. The Liberation System, where you can free slaves and recruit Maroons. But this system is kind of invisible and becomes useless very quickly. Invisible meaning that the benefits or changes that come with the system are minuscule at best. It's basically the shipmate recruitment system, but with a slavery themed coat of paint. It's nothing special, really. What makes the system a bit infuriating though, is when you're required to liberate a certain amount of slaves and Maroons to progress through the campaign, just to have those slaves and Maroons be absolutely irrelevant to the missions that follow. In fact, let's talk mission design. It's pretty good and feels a bit more varied than Black Flag story missions, I'll give it that. Freedom Cry will have you doing a bit of naval combat, sneaking around as an undercover slave with no weapons on you at one point, tailing a few people, eavesdropping on a few people, investigations, which are basically small side missions inside a story mission, and one of my favorite parts of the game, boarding a sinking slave ship. The mission where you board a sinking slave ship is a great mission from a thematic and gameplay standpoint. Thematically, it shows that no matter how hard you try, you can't save everybody. And sometimes that inconvenience will be shoved in your face as we swim our way out of the sinking ship with drowned and floating corpses of slaves we just freed. Gameplay wise, the set piece nicely makes use of the underwater swimming that Black Flag hardly used in its story missions. And later on, the mission makes proper use of platforming, and you know I'm always down for some good old platforming. The last mission has you sneaking into the same mansion that you infiltrated as an undercover slave, having to assassinate the governor. You can either kill him silently from a distance, or try to get up close and kill him quickly, but risk going on a long goose chase. For a roughly 3-hour campaign, the missions are nicely varied and the pacing is fairly good, except when the liberation system gets in the way halfway through. Now, one thing I find a bit and unfortunately ironic is the map. For a game about freedom, there isn't much room to feel free, at least not in a way that feels compelling or interesting. The map of Haiti isn't that big, which is fine, but add in the fact that there's not a lot going on within the map and Freedom Cry's open world starts to get boring pretty fast. Port-au-Prince and the rest of Haiti isn't really all that interesting to roam around in, outside of its atmosphere. It's easily the most boring map in the series. There's no interesting landmarks, hidden areas, or anything worthy of exploring. The side content is lackluster and mostly consists of endless 30-second encounter missions, with no proper side missions. There are also the plantations that keep needing to be liberated every so often. And back when I was talking about the story, this is what I meant by the colonies feeling stronger than ever. All the liberating you do around the map doesn't really matter, and I can understand that from a historical perspective how it wasn't that easy to stop slavery, which is also why I'll let the endless encounter missions slide. But the plantation should have been a permanent liberation and should have been treated as this game's side missions. Certain side activities return from Black Flag, such as exploring shipwrecks, even though there's only one shipwreck to be exact, and harpooning. Gambling is nowhere to be found, which would have been nice to see in the Bordeo, adding a bit of fun, replayable content. But at the same time, who brings a checkers board to a brothel? What sucks about most of these side content is that they are all tied to the useless liberation system. Completing encounter missions rewards you with slaves, and clearing plantations rewards you with slaves and maroons. The side content, although appreciated, just ends up being a waste of time. I wish there were at least 3 or 5 proper side missions, but looking at how long it took to develop Freedom Cry and the size of the game, the side content on offer isn't too bad, I guess. And it is just an expansion, right? Right? Except, no. Even for an expansion, this game lacks quality content and doesn't achieve anything in the process. Let's look at Infamous Festival of Blood, another open world game that was an expansion of a great game, like Freedom Cry was an expansion of Black Flag. Festival of Blood's campaign is about an hour and a half shorter than Freedom Cry's, yet it feels more worth playing and is just as entertaining from start to finish. It's a short story done right. The story follows one simple plotline and fleshes it out in a way that there's still extra time to flesh out other aspects of the story, such as the antagonist and her backstory. The game even provides a bit of context and history for our 2 returning characters, for those who haven't played the previous games, and those characters return with their lovable charm from the sister game. Therefore, we're given a completely fleshed out short story that still manages to be a fun and memorable rollercoaster within its condensed but sharp, under 2-hour campaign. The side content is decent, but with the new additions to gameplay that really spices up the base game systems, there's a bit more to offer beyond its short but fun campaign. Compare Festival of Blood to Freedom Cry, however, and you see why the latter game is still lacking in several areas. Freedom Cry tries to do too much within its short story, meaning there's no time to flesh out the characters. Adewale doesn't return with his charm from the previous game, and almost no context is given to his character in terms of his actions or legacy in the previous game, for those who haven't played Black Flag. Even as a short expansion, the much smaller game makes the slightly bigger game look tiny and wasted in comparison. And that's not good.
Son, how much you willing to sacrifice to win, huh? I personally done paid mines and then some, climbed up an inch at a time, now who does end one?
Let me summarize what I think they should have done with Freedom Cry. Story-wise, forget the box. Flesh out the 2 supporting characters and tap into the differences of power between them. Show us the governor a bit more and give us a strong impression of him beforehand, not at the end. Gameplay wise, the liberation system should have played a bigger role when it came to missions and the open world. We should have had slaves and maroons fighting alongside Adewale, but I can see how that wasn't possible with the development time that Ubisoft had. Programming NPCs are harder than you think. But with that being the case, the liberation system shouldn't have even been presented as that big of a deal. The exploration and map design should have been a bit more emphasized, especially in this game, to reinforce that freedom aspect. Have more underwater shipwrecks, or have topside shipwrecks like Rogue, or have interesting hidden areas near plantations or within Port-au-Prince. The amount of depth and history Freedom Cry's map could have had. There could have even been slaves hiding in these areas, who knows? Freedom Cry feels lost. It's a strange entry even for a mainline Assassin's Creed spin-off. Compared to Liberation and Rogue, this game is unironically a black sheep, which sucks because it has such a powerful premise, it is treated as such a minor thing. It's a playable story about one of the best characters in the franchise, yet that same story doesn't do the character justice. I'm aware of the development cycle this expansion had, but even then it's a poorly thought out expansion. If the game used this time wisely, like Liberation, this would have been one of the best stories in an expansion. Freedom Cry just oozes with potential that would be left untapped. I want to like Freedom Cry, especially since it was the first Assassin's Creed game I 100% completed with full synchronization. Even though I've played certain portions of the first 2 games, Brotherhood, 3, and Black Flag, I consider Freedom Cry to be my first proper playthrough of an Assassin's Creed game. And I'd be lying if I said Freedom Cry didn't make me crave some more Assassin's Creed. And because of that craving, I decided to jump back into the Animus and properly start from the series' humble beginnings to its contentious present. I got to witness Altair's growth from an arrogant assassin to a wise master assassin. I got to see Ezio's life from literal birth to literal death. I got to meet some of the best supporting characters in gaming within Edward's emotional journey. I got introduced to Shay, my favorite character in the series, with Assassin's Creed Rogue. I got to bore myself with Connor's story, although the Tyranny of King Washington DLC as well as the modern day segments were pretty tight. I got to experience Aveline's unique story and the world it inhabited. I got to infuriate myself with Unity's new movement system, and ignore Unity's story in the process, and then have Syndicate redeem my faith in the series, only for me to quit Origins 33 hours in and give up on the games that followed. I got introduced to some of my favorite storytellers, from Darby McDevitt to Oliver Bowden and Richard Farice. I got to understand a bit more why people dislike the Assassin's Creed movie, even though I still think it's a great movie that was holding back a bit too much. Assassin's Creed, prior to playing Freedom Cry, has always played a bit of a big role in my childhood, and now that I've replayed the glory days of the series, it's one of my favorite franchises in all of entertainment. I have the books and the comics, I've played the mainline games, I have all the soundtracks, even for the games I didn't really like. I'm obsessed with the movie, and I've seen all the short films. And because of all that, I understand Freedom Cry a bit more now. I originally stated that Freedom Cry was a bit underrated, and boy was I wrong. I know I bashed this expansion quite harshly, but Freedom Cry, at the right price, isn't a bad game, nor is it necessarily a bad Assassin's Creed game. It just could have been better, given more thought and a bit more time. Unfortunately, I don't see myself coming back to Freedom Cry anytime soon. I've done all I needed to do, seen everything I needed to see, got all the trophies, completed the campaign from start to finish around 5 times, and now I've made 2 videos on the game. There's no reason for me to go back to this game anymore. I've drained it dry of its contents. The game doesn't quite hook me the same way Liberation, Rogue, or any of the bigger games do. And with that being said, I shall leave the world of Freedom Cry at peace.
Yeah, let me so got a lie.